The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting NORML.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, tokers and tokettes. It is Tuesday, December 28th, 2010, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us for the next 2 hours of news, talk, interviews, information, music, comedy, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. We're brought to you by the NORML Foundation and coming to you live from Rolla J Studios here in beautiful Potland, Oregon. Normally joining me by my side would be the pirate Ganja John, but he's doing piratey activities down there in Florida. So joining me from our virtual studio in beautiful Grastoria, Oregon is the lovely and talented Cannabis Carrie.
Hi, Russ.
Much better.
You look more rested today.
I know.
At least you looked dressed.
Yeah, much better start to the show today. For those of you who missed yesterday, I woke up 4 minutes before showtime and did not realize I had left the studio camera on. Some of you got a little bit more radical, Russ, than you could ever have wished or hoped for. We apologize for that. But today's show, great stuff coming up on today. Of course, the reason for my strange sleeping schedule is the past 2 days I have been guest hosting the Bill Press Show, the nationally syndicated talk radio show that's heard all over the country. Today I had callers from Petoskey, Michigan, Placentia, California, Portland, Oregon, Phoenix, Arizona, San Francisco, California, Kansas City, Missouri, West Seattle, Washington, Chicago, Illinois, Long Island, New York, and Fort Myers, Florida. We were heard all over the country these past 2 days, and I dedicated both days to marijuana law reform. Yesterday's show is uploaded at stash.normal.org, and today a special extended version, even for those of you listening on podcast, an extended version of NORML Show Live. We are going to play the entire 3 hours of the Bill Press Show. Now, don't worry, it's compressed because we took all the commercials out of it, so really only ends up being a little over 2 hours. You'll get to enjoy that at the bottom of this hour. At half past, we will start playing that Bill Press Show replay. Great guests on today's Bill Press Show. I had Alan St. Pierre, the head of NORML, Chris Goldstein from Coalition of Medical Marijuana, New Jersey. We had Major Neil Franklin from LEAP, Miko Hester Perez from the Unconventional Foundation for Autism, and Ann Davis from NORML, New Jersey. It was kind of like my greatest hits lineup of interviewees from NORML Show Live, and I think it went over very, very well with the progressive talk radio crowd. Also on today's show, we have got your Electric Tuesday Daily Toker Tunes. We'll get that uploaded and played for you here at 20 after the hour. But before all of that, we turn to Cannabis Carrie with our hemp headlines. What's in our news today, Carrie?
Well, today we're going to go over 2 privacy issues I think you are going to find interesting. And also we're going to go to New Orleans for an updated story down there about how they're going to handle tourists who are caught smoking a little reefer. All
right. Changes coming up in New Orleans and the Crescent City. That will be very interesting to talk about. We got Cannabis Cure UK joining us at 20 after the hour with Daily Toker Tunes. Bill Press Show coming up at half past. Thanks for putting up with me and my tiredness. We'll be back right after this.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
In today's busy world, we're inundated by advertising for all types of pharmaceuticals that come with a laundry list of potential side effects. Shouldn't you have better medical choices? Natural alternatives to pills pushed by Big Pharma? At Alternative Medical Choices, you could choose natural, safe, and effective alternative therapies that are right for your budget without nasty side effects. Cannabis, or marijuana, has been a legal medicine in the Pacific Northwest since 1998. Our doctors will help determine your qualifications for a medical marijuana recommendation in Oregon, no matter where you live. Our massage therapists will ease your aches and stress with soothing hemp seed oil or cannabis-infused massage salves. We also offer acupuncture, Reiki, and other alternative health therapies. Call Alternative Medical Choices in Portland, Oregon at 503-288-5579 or visit our website at www.altmedchoices.com. We specialize in out-of-state recommendations. That's www.altmedchoices.com or call 503-288-5579.
You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. That's what you got to do. Liberate your mind.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's Normal News with Cannabis Carrie.
The city of New Orleans has had its share of challenges before and after Hurricane Katrina. According to the Los Angeles Times, the New Orleans police force now has a large red square painted on the wall in the squad room right behind the lectern that they face at the beginning of every shift as a reminder to officers here. It means they don't arrest squares. And by squares, they mean everyday citizens and tourists who may be guilty of a minor infraction but are not contributing to New Orleans' violent crimes. Cutting tourists some slack is a major philosophical shift for the city, one that in the past has had the nation's highest per capita jail detention rate, but still has been unable to rein in its more serious crimes. This year, New Orleans is on track to have the highest per capita murder rate. But in recent months, the city police, prosecutors, and politicians are taking steps to put fewer minor offenders behind bars to try and free up resources to tackle the city's more serious crimes. This effort culminated in a new city ordinance passed this month that gives officers the option of handing out court summonses to anyone suspected of marijuana possession in lieu of taking them to jail. The penalties for the crimes will remain the same, but now hundreds of tourists and minor offenders will not be hauled off to the notorious New Orleans Parish Prison. The Big Easy was anything but for a tourist accused of smoking a joint earlier. For many tourists that are under the impression that anything goes in the historic Bourbon Street, the inside of the Orleans Parish Prison was quite a shock. Police Deputy Superintendent Kirk Borealis said it is a major shift in the precinct that they don't need to be arresting people for silly, minor things. The focus on crime before had up to 70% of the cases police sent to criminal court were for possession of small amounts of marijuana. Borealis doesn't think police will want to issue summonses to tourists found with marijuana because they wouldn't be likely to show up in court anyway. But he said the city was considering testing a sobering center with nurses and a psychiatrist where drunks or those under the influence could be sent in lieu of arrest. The thinking is that if low-level offenders know they won't be going to jail, it will de-escalate the encounters people have with the police. I'm just glad to know that minor cannabis tokers are now considered squares.
Yeah, that's funny. We'll have to give classes on people visiting New Orleans on how to dress and act like a square so that they don't get thrown into the Orleans jail. It's a strange thing. And there's a comment in the chat room that says, if it's not worth arresting someone over, why is it worth fining someone over? And that's true. It's something I always get back to when we start talking about decriminalization. We talk about this idea of, don't lock people up for their personal use of cannabis. Let's just give them a fine. We'll just ticket them and make them pay a fine. Why? Why are we fining people that might want to use marijuana? I mean, I understand the fines that we have for speeding and the fines we have for parking in the wrong spot without a permit. Those all make sense because we want people to follow the rules with regard to traffic so that we can all, have the same roads to drive upon, that we can all get where we're going, that we can do so in an orderly fashion, that when we show up, the places we'll have places to park because someone else hasn't stolen it. I understand all that. What is the fine for using marijuana attempting to stop? Is it attempting to stop people from using marijuana? I highly doubt it. People just recognize what the fine is and they will continue to smoke marijuana. It's very strange to me, this moralism that's so attached to this war on marijuana. This idea that for some reason smoking marijuana is somehow a moral bad when drinking all the alcohol you could ever care to drink on Bourbon Street, a place called Bourbon Street for God's sake, is somehow good.
And the full body scanners that are in use at 78 U.S. airports have faced much criticism, mostly because travelers feel that they are invasive and also because the machines can miss deadly explosive materials taped to someone's abdomen or hidden inside a body cavity. Researchers and security experts question the technology's ability to detect chemical explosives that are odorless, far smaller than previous explosive materials, and easily molded to fool machines and security screeners into thinking they are part of the human body. Government testing, which has been mostly classified because of security concerns, has also raised concerns about the effectiveness of full body scanners. But although the scanners may not be able to find some hidden explosives on travelers, the X-ray machines have been able to detect small amounts of contraband and have been successful several hundred times at finding small amounts of marijuana wrapped in baggies. One of the more reported TSA marijuana busts happened earlier this month when a TSA scanner found less than an ounce of marijuana on hip-hop legend Curtis Blow. A recent paper on the issue of body scanners in the Journal of Transportation Security said the real work is left to TSA agents who are trained to see anomalies, not necessarily explosives. Clark Irvin, who runs the Homeland Security program at the Aspen Institute, says that an agent has to notice that there is something out of order for the scanners to work, saying they are not explosive detectors, they are anomaly detectors. And it is as far as finding explosives are concerned, a pat-down might be more effective than the full-body scanners. But the scanners are being ordered and purchased at a dizzying pace at airports all over the globe. In the U.S. alone, there will be over 1,000 X-ray body scanners operational in the U.S. by the end of 2011. But when the devices are better suited to finding drugs or other contraband than they are at finding explosives, it's easy to question the motivation for the hysterical buying of thousands of these machines.
Well, it's all about that illusion of security. It's all about the American need to think that there's some sort of magical machine or magical technology that'll keep us all safe, that'll prevent any planes from ever blowing up ever again. Folks, it just does not exist. Those who would trade essential liberty to gain the illusion of security deserve neither. And I'm a little riled up here at one of the chatters in the chat room who said, well, if you don't like it, don't fly. Is that the way our constitutional rights are built here? Is that we have to give them up if we want to travel across our country in some sort of timely fashion? I mean, that sort of attitude is what we heard, from Nazi Germany and other tyrannical regimes. If you don't have anything to hide, what do you have to fear? What? If you don't like it, don't fly. Boy, that just really makes me mad because that's not what America is about. What if we get to the point where at our state borders they decide they want to put in some of those X-ray backscatters for our cars? If they want to use these types of X-ray machines, if we travel from Oregon to California to make sure that we're not diverting any medical marijuana or something like that, would that be good enough? Would it be good enough to say, oh, well, if you don't like it, don't travel out of state? That's not what America is built on. We need to get back to the concept of the Fourth Amendment, back to the concept of the Fifth Amendment as well, that we deserve our privacy. There is nothing about wanting to travel across this country at some sort of reasonable time here across this great land of ours, people flying for business, people flying for pleasure, people flying to meet up with their families, loved ones, what have you. There is no reason we should have to give up our constitutional rights in order to have to travel throughout this great land of ours.
And that will lead us right into our next story about traveling around the country. A superior court in Delaware has gutted a criminal case against a Newark man who was pulled over with 10 pounds of marijuana because the police used a GPS tracking device without a warrant to follow the man for almost a month. The deputy attorney in the case had argued that the information from the GPS in this case was only part of a larger, multifaceted case against 28-year-old Michael Holden. Last February, police saw what they believed to be an exchange of cash for for drugs in New Jersey, although they did not see any cash or drugs, only a bag. They called the Delaware police to stop Mr. Holden's car as it crossed into Delaware. During that stop, police found a duffel bag holding 10 pounds of marijuana. But the defense attorney said that the 20-day-long use of a GPS tracking device to track his client weeks before the police got a tip about the February 28th exchange amounted to an unreasonable search under the state constitution and violated his privacy without probable cause. While police have long been allowed to follow suspects as they drive from place to place without a warrant, the ruling from Delaware Superior Court Judge Jan Jordan said that using a GPS device is different. She wrote in her ruling, quote, "The advance of technology will continue ad infinitum. An Orwellian state is now technologically feasible. Without adequate judicial preservation of privacy, there is nothing to protect our citizens from being tracked 24/7, unquote. Although the police can follow a suspect in public, there are natural limits to how long officers can keep up with the tail. But a GPS never sleeps, and the ruling said that it provides more information than one reasonably expects to be exposed to the public." She said to get the same level of detail using only old-fashioned police surveillance techniques would require millions of additional police officers and cameras on every street lamp. And if no warrants are required for that level of a search, any individual can be tracked indefinitely without suspicion of any crime. The judge concluded that no one should be subject to such scrutiny by police without probable cause as would be lined out in a warrant. In Mr. Holden's case, that means the duffel bag evidence will be suppressed, forcing prosecutors to drop marijuana trafficking and possession charges that carried a minimum of 2 years in prison and up to 20 years if he was convicted. The judge wanted to make it clear, though, she was not ruling that police couldn't use GPS devices, only that a warrant must be justified and issued before such a device could be used. Now, this puts Delaware in line with other states that are looking into warrantless 24/7 tracking by police as an infringement of rights. The Attorney General's office is now considering appealing the ruling to the Delaware Supreme Court. In other states, that route has sided with the police on the issue, such as in Oregon and New York. But according to the judge in this case, she says that the Delaware Constitution affords greater protection than the United States Constitution in this area.
Yeah, we're leaving it up to these state constitutions. It's kind of like what we've got going on in Alaska, where they're allowed to possess an ounce of marijuana and use it in the home, not because marijuana is legal, but because of their state constitution's stronger privacy protections. And I believe this issue of privacy is going to be very important in the 21st century as we continue to see more and more of these technological innovations to track and search and scan all of us citizens here in America. When the Founding Fathers were putting together our Constitution and they were saying we need to have the right to be secure in our persons, papers, houses, and effects, they could never have imagined what would be possible through the use of GPS technology. This idea that we can put a little GPS scanner on someone's car and know exactly where they've gone every minute of the day. Try explaining that to James Madison. Try explaining that to Thomas Jefferson. The idea that there would be an invisible government clerk unknown to the person in their carriage, transcribing the locations and the times of every stop and every travel that carriage made. Try explaining that to George Washington and Ben Franklin and see if they think that would make a whole lot of sense. That without a warrant, the government should be able to put an invisible clerk in your car transcribing all of your movements 24 hours a day. I can't likely believe that's something they would think matches the idea of a privacy right in this country. We need to start addressing these technological issues and pointing out that we have an electronic right to privacy as well. We have a right to be anonymous. We have a right to go places without people knowing it. We have a right to travel from place to place without being unreasonably searched, without having x-rays of our naked bodies being taken. It's gone too far in this country. And I know there's people that are saying, well, if you want to fly, it's a private airplane. They can make any rules they want to. Yeah, absolutely they can. But how far do we let this go? How far do we let these private entities go in providing this illusion of security and throwing away our constitutional rights in exchange for it? I'm just sad to see Americans so willing to lie down and roll over on this issue. Well, I've got nothing to hide. I don't care if they x-ray me and check me out. out and see, what I look like naked, or gee, I don't care if my grandma is pulled out of line and given the frisking and the bladed hand between the boobs and the hands up the thighs to make sure she's not a terrorist. I'm really sad about this, and I'm sad for people that have children more than for myself, because it's your kids who are going to have to live in the tyrannical states of America. All right, folks, time to take a well-deserved break with the old Gandalf. When we come back, Cannabis Cure joins us from across the pond in the UK with our Electric Tuesday Daily Toker Tune.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would send you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Ever wonder how often to change your bong water? The most effective method for making pot brownies? The best destinations for a ganja getaway? How to hide herb in your car? Whether to grow your own? How precisely to legalize it? Or how something as wonderful as marijuana ever got to be illegal in the first place? Finally, you can find all these answers and much more in the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook, featuring 420 things to do when you're stoned. Since 1974, High Times Magazine has covered marijuana in all its aspects and wonders, from cultivation to legalization to the herb's enduring and exalted place in popular culture. Packed with inside information, the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook rolls all of this collected wisdom together into a single indispensable ganja guide, including an entertaining look at marijuana's history, profiles of herb-friendly travel destinations and festivals, favorite potluck recipes from the High Times staff, smoking skills, advocacy and activism, essential marijuana movies and songs, profiles of famous cannabis strains, comprehensive growing information, celebrity endorsements, and much more. This is truly, finally, the ultimate guide to green living.
Georgia.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson, and I need your help. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 20s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stop arresting law-abiding citizens because they prefer marijuana over alcohol. Nearly 2,000 Americans are arrested every day on marijuana charges. We're unfairly destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of people each year simply because they smoke marijuana. These are not criminals. They're average citizens like you, good neighbors who work hard, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to their communities. We need your help to end marijuana prohibition once and for all. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it. And didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Mr. President.
Said, hey, do you have a joint, kid? Sure would be a lot cooler if you did. Line it, don't hide it. Line it, don't hide it. Oh, line it, don't hide it. Line it, don't hide it. Just line it, don't hide it. Fire up right
now. It's time for your Daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420-friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Our PodSafe music is donated by freedom-loving musicians who support our goal of ending adult marijuana prohibition. Today we bring you tunes for Electric Tuesday, our segment featuring the best of modern electronic music in the genres of dance, new age, house, and electronica. Brought to you by Greg in Surrey, Sussex, England, and Cannabis Cure, UK. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@norml.org. Now, here's some great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes.
All right, welcome back, folks. 24 after the hour, and what a treat today. We are joined live by Greg, a.k.a. Cannabis Cure UK. Welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah. How's it going?
Oh, it's doing really well here. We're getting things put together on the fly as we speak, but always fun here to have you here on Electric Tuesday. Tell folks about this band and this tune that we got coming up.
This one is called Grass Rooster by a band called Wobbly Squadron. They are sort of a dancey, sort of funk groove ravey band. They're from the same area as me. I've played a few gigs with them before. They're nice bunch of people. They've got a clarinet, a bizarre array of instrumental instruments. You can percussion instruments. Sorry, instrumental instruments. You can find their videos on. Well, you'll find it on the link on the stash. I was going to say YouTube, but I couldn't think of the word.
MySpace?
Yeah, on the MySpace. They've got a MySpace as well. And they've played quite a few festivals. They played one called Guildfest, which is frequented by the classic bands that don't get other gigs anymore. But they sort of play the festival tent rather than the sort of main stage. But they do pull quite a big crowd, and it's quite a good time. There's quite a lot of weed in the air.
I'll bet there is. All right, this is Grarse Rooster. Grarse, is that really it? Grarse? Is that a British thing?
Grarse. It's an old country word for the English. Grarse.
All right, Grarse Rooster with Wobbly Squadron. Enjoy this for our daily Toker tune here on this Electric Tuesday. If I can get the darn thing to play. There it goes. Thanks a lot, Greg. We'll talk to you next week.
Take care. See you soon. Bye.
Toker Tunes at the Stash blog by surfing to stash.normal.org and choosing Media, and then Toker Tunes from the main menu.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, Tokers and Tokettes. As you know, I guest hosted the Bill Press Show this last 2 days, Monday and Tuesday. It's a 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern Time progressive talk radio show. It's one of the top listened to progressive talk radio shows in the country. Had callers from all over this great nation, and we dedicated both days to pot. I called it the Bill Press Show Goes to Pot, and we talked about marijuana law reform, cannabis, industrial hemp, medical marijuana, decriminalization. We talked about it all, and I was really excited to get a chance to get out from in front of the choir here at Normal Show Live. Nothing against the choir. We love y'all, but it was very nice to get out there and talk to the rest of the progressives and to warn them that they are missing out on this issue of marijuana law reform, and the conservatives are going to steal it from them if they're not careful. We're going to play the entire 3-hour broadcast. This does take about 2 hours and 15 minutes when we take the commercials out, so enjoy this extended version of Normal Show Live featuring today's sit-in on the Bill Press Show.
One of the top most listened to radio shows.
That voice of yours could be an attraction at a circus.
Are you joking? Is this a joke?
Hello, my friends. Welcome. It's the Bill Press Show, but I am not Bill Press. I'm Radical Russ Belville from the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, bringing you day 2 of the Bill Press Show Goes to Pot.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Oh, R.I.P. Leslie Nielsen. Gonna miss him. Yeah, Bill Press Show Goes to Pot. Welcome to the show. I am the host of Normal Show Live, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws daily podcast and talk show on the internet, live 1 p.m. Pacific time at live.normal.org. And Bill asked me here to guest host these 2 days for you, Monday and Tuesday. We are very glad to be here and glad to be getting the response that we're getting from a lot of the listeners of the Bill Press Show. You know, one of my points here of these past 2 days is to bring to the progressive audience this issue of the war on drugs and specifically the war on marijuana. It's a political topic that's been in the news all this year. Of course, we had 4 different states that were looking at liberalizing their marijuana laws. One of those states passed medical marijuana, the state of Arizona. And we're going to be talking in depth about medical marijuana today. This is something that is starting to take root in the East Coast, but there's a lot of misinformation and scaremongering going on. So on today's show, we're going to bring you some of the experts on marijuana and politics. Today, we'll be speaking with Alan St. Pierre, the executive director of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. And we're going to take a look at the politics of marijuana. Why are progressives missing out on this message? Why are progressives so shy about addressing this stupid war on drugs that we've been executing for 40 years now? We'll talk to Alan St. Pierre about that at the bottom of the hour. Also, we'll be speaking with Chris Goldstein from the Coalition for Medical Marijuana, New Jersey. He's going to show us just how important it is to get out and vote, what a difference a governor can make in the state of New Jersey. If you've heard that New Jersey is one of the medical marijuana laws, well, you haven't heard the whole story. The new Republican governor, Chris Christie, out there is doing everything he can to thwart the will of the people. Chris Goldstein will tell you all about that. In our second hour, cops. That's right, cops say legalize drugs. We'll be visiting with Major Neil Franklin, a former Baltimore narcotics detective who is now the executive director of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. He'll tell you why the cops who are working on the front lines of the war on drugs know how futile this effort is and are calling out for sensible regulation and legalization of drugs. And then in our last hour, we're going to talk about the children, because everybody's all afraid when we talk about marijuana legalization. Oh gosh, what about the children? We're going to talk to the mothers out there there who are dealing with this war on drugs. First, we'll speak with Miko Hester Perez. You may have caught her on the morning talk shows, Good Morning America, and some others. She is the woman who has founded the Unconventional Foundation for Autism. She is using medical marijuana on her 10-year-old severely autistic son. It's very controversial. You'll get all the details in our third hour. Also, Ann Davis from NORML, New Jersey. We'll talk about family law. She's a practicing family law attorney, and how this war on drugs is breaking up families and harming children. But first, I want to talk to some of our listeners out there, because I have been getting, like I said earlier, a lot of response to these 2 days of programming, and most of it positive. Most of the Bill Press listeners have been emailing me saying, this is great. We're glad that you are taking an in-depth look at this. This is something that's important. We need to be addressing this. But, as a radio professional, as a performer, you can get a million compliments, but when you get that one complaint, that always stands out to you. And I did. I got a complaint about these 2 days. I got a regular Bill Press listener who emailed me and said, seriously? 2 days? Talking about marijuana? Boring topic. I'll check back in on Wednesday. Well, it's a real shame that you thought that way, because that's the kind of mindset that is losing elections for progressives and is starting to whittle away the youth base and the progressive base of the Democratic Party. I campaigned vigorously for President Obama. I did fundraising speeches for him here in Portland, Oregon. But I got to tell you, if I had to do this show on the Obama administration and my opinions of it, I'm afraid the Bill Press Show listeners wouldn't like it as much as my marijuana show. I'll tell you that much. I'm a little tired of being called the professional left and an effing retard, according to, I believe it was Rahm Emanuel who mentioned that, and Robert Gibbs calling us the professional left and the whiners. Well, you know what? It's time to start addressing this base, Mr. Obama. It's time for the Democratic Party to start realizing that the progressive base is the future, the youth are the future, and this war on drugs is something that we take very seriously because it impacts our lives in such a way that few other issues do. And I want to illustrate that for you, because I think a lot of people, share that attitude of the listener who wrote me and said, "Oh, just a war on drugs, big deal, who cares?" I think you would be hard-pressed to find another issue in American politics today that so greatly affects our Bill of Rights. I carry around with myself a constitution, a little pocket constitution, keep it in my jacket, and I like to refer to it to time, to remember our history, our heritage, and what's left of it after the Bush administration. But this war on drugs affects just about every right in our Bill of Rights. Now, fans of the Keith Olbermann show, Countdown with Keith Olbermann, will remember when he did a list on terrorism and how the Bush administration had crossed out all of the Bill of Rights. Well, there's something similar going on here with this war on drugs, with this Nixonian war on drugs. So let me just illustrate to you how this war on drugs is affecting your rights. Because, people don't think about this. They think, oh, it's just the dope smokers. Who cares about them? But this does affect every single one of us. First of all, we have our First Amendment to the Constitution that says Congress will make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. There are about 500,000 Rastafarians and Coptic Christians in this country who are prevented from exercising their religion, to freely exercise thereof. They are prevented from exercising their religion that believes in the sacrament of ganja, the healing of the nations, they call it. They're prevented from exerting that right because of the war on drugs, because marijuana is Schedule 1. Now you think, okay, well, it's an illegal drug. Their religion says you can't use an illegal drug because it's your religion. But the fact is, you can. There's a couple of cases where the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, signed by President Clinton, has guaranteed the right of certain religious groups to use Schedule 1 substances, including a very powerful hallucinogen called ayahuasca. They use it in a tea, and certain Native American tribes are allowed to use peyote buttons, the hallucinogenic cactus. So those religions are allowed their free exercise of a use of a Schedule 1 drug as sacrament, but not the Coptic Christians and the Rastafarians. They can't use the ganja, which is, by the way, a less harmful and less powerful drug than either ayahuasca or peyote. And the reasoning, if you work your way through all the court decisions, the reasoning is because cannabis is too popular. That's right. Your God's sacrament is just too darn popular, so we can't let you worship freely. So there you go. First Amendment, freedom of religion, cut short for certain people because of the war on drugs. Also, we have the First Amendment says that the Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Abridging the freedom of speech. This year, I did a story and interviewed a man named Bob Newland in South Dakota. Now, you may realize that South Dakota just attempted another medical marijuana initiative on the 2010 ballot. Bob Newland was the head of South Dakota NORML and a very prominent activist for medical marijuana in South Dakota. He was sentenced by a judge in a case that involved possession of marijuana. He was sentenced by a judge to not advocate for medical marijuana. He was sentenced to not work on the political campaign for the initiative for medical marijuana. His freedom of speech, his freedom of the press, abridged because the judge didn't like the morality of the political issue that he was working for. Now, take a look at the Second Amendment to the Constitution. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And, of course, the Supreme Court recently decided that meant an individual's right to keep and bear arms. Let me tell you the story of Stephen Sarich and a number of other patients up here in the Pacific Northwest who are legal, registered medical marijuana patients, absolutely complying with state law. And yet, the county sheriffs in these states, in both Oregon and Washington, are refusing to renew or to allow for the new petition for a concealed weapons permit. Because these people are using marijuana, and because marijuana is federally illegal, and because the gun laws say that they cannot issue these permits to people who are drug users, they are refusing to allow these people to exercise their Second Amendment rights. And in some cases, we're talking about patients who are growing their own medical marijuana to avoid the high costs of the street and avoid the black market problems. They're growing their own medical marijuana legally under state law, not allowed to keep a firearm at home. The kind of people who would be most subject to break-ins and home invasion robberies, not allowed to defend themselves under the Second Amendment because of this war on drugs. We got more amendments to talk about. Just about every one is covered under this war on drugs. We'll be right back in just a moment. We got to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the Constitution, the war on drugs. This is the Bill Press Show.
Broadcasting live from the capital of the free world. This is the Bill Press Show.
Welcome back, folks. Bill Press Show. I'm Radical Russ Belville, filling in for Bill. Our phone number here is 866-55-PRESS. That's 866-55-77-377. Coming up in the next segment, we're speaking with Alan St. Pierre, the executive director of NORML. And are progressives missing out on the politics of marijuana? Are we going to lose younger voters to some of the conservatives out there that are starting to talk about ending the war on drugs? We'll talk about that in just about 10 minutes. I want to continue what I was talking about with the Constitution and this war on drugs, how it negatively affects all of our constitutional rights. We left off on the Second Amendment. Of course, the Third Amendment is that no soldier shall be, in time of peace, quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner prescribed by law. That one's safe. As far as I can tell, nothing in the war on drugs has forced us to house any soldiers, so we're good there. 1 out of 10. The Fourth Amendment, of course, is your right to be secure in your persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, this one, the war on drugs, has probably affected more than most. Of course, we have all sorts of no-knock warrants. Between 100 and 150 paramilitary SWAT raids are executed in the United States against United States citizens for charges involving drugs. And since more than half of all arrests in the war on drugs are for marijuana, the majority then of these SWAT raids have to do with some sort of marijuana case. And I tell these tragic stories every month of somebody's house being raided. The most recent one in Missouri, a man's house raided over what turns out to be a small amount of marijuana, a couple of grams. But the cops burst in, middle of the night, flashbang grenades, firing 7 shots in the home at 2 dogs, a Yorkie and a terrier of some sort, killing the dogs in front of the man's 7-year-old kid. This is what's going on with our Fourth Amendment rights. Not to mention the drug testing that is so pervasive in this country. And of course, drug testing, urine testing for marijuana, doesn't at all prove that someone is impaired on marijuana. It just proves that they have used it at some time. People are losing their jobs, losing their careers, their homes, their families because of this drug testing. The Fifth Amendment, of course, is that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or infamous crime except except upon presentment of a grand jury, the protections against double jeopardy, protections against being compelled to testify against yourself in a court of law. Well, first of all, drug testing right off the bat there is testifying against yourself in a court of law, being a witness against yourself. As far as the double jeopardy goes, interesting case here. This was a case out of California, a man named Jovan Jackson, who was running a medical marijuana dispensary in accordance with California's Prop 215, their medical marijuana law. And down in San Diego, there is a district attorney named Bonnie Dumanis who hates the medical marijuana law, has been doing everything she can to overturn it. She prosecuted this man by sending cops undercover to, with fake IDs, mind you, cops with fake IDs to go to a doctor to get a legitimate medical marijuana recommendation under fraudulent circumstances, but the recommendation itself was legitimate. These cops undercover, fake IDs with doctors' recommendations, going to these dispensaries. Once the dispensary owner gives them some medical marijuana, she swoops in, has the man busted. Well, Jovan Jackson was taken to trial on these charges, and he was acquitted on all of the charges because of his medical use of marijuana. So what did Bonnie Dumanis do? She set up another sting, the exact same sting, cops using fake IDs, going undercover, getting their medical marijuana papers, going to the dispensary, getting some medical marijuana. But this time, Bonnie Dumanis was lucky enough to get a judge who isn't so friendly to medical marijuana. He would not allow the medical use to be entered into testimony in this courtroom, and Jovan Jackson was convicted. So while technically it's not double jeopardy because it was two separate investigations that were involved here, it was for the exact same business. It was for the exact same actions. Definitely not the spirit of the Fifth Amendment that our founders wrote. In Amendment 6, we talk about the right to an impartial jury and the ability to have counsel for our defense. Well, an interesting story on the war on drugs took place here that went in our favor as far as progressives and those of us who love the Constitution. In Montana, a man was up on trial for charges involving 2 grams of marijuana. Now, not talking medical here, just 2 grams of marijuana were part of his charges. The prosecutor could not seat a jury in the case. When he asked people about the case and it involving a couple of grams of marijuana and whether or not the jurors could be impartial in rendering a verdict on this case, 5 of them raised their hands and said, well, no, I couldn't really convict anyone for that little amount of marijuana. I just couldn't do it. And as they rose their hands, more of the jurors out of this pool of 27 said, yeah, this is a waste of time. Why are we bothering to prosecute this guy for a couple of grams of bud? So we had what was called a jury revolt or a jury mutiny. What I call it is a jury doing their job properly, deciding not just whether or not the law itself, or not whether the facts of the case indicate the person broke the law, but actually judging the law itself. Amendment 7 says that we shall have the right to a jury trial. Many of these jury trials are waived. The plea bargain agreements that take place in these drug cases make that impossible. The 8th Amendment says there should not be excessive bail or cruel and unusual punishment. Let's talk about Roger Christie, the minister in Hawaii who's being held right now without bail because he dares to preach that marijuana is a sacrament and it's a religious right. He is being held without bail. Meanwhile, people that are under the same exact type of charges often get bail because they're not politically active like Roger Christie is. And talk about cruel and unusual punishments. Right here in Washington, D.C., a man named Jonathan Magby, a paralyzed medical marijuana patient, was held in a cell, not allowed to use his medical marijuana, of course, and died in that cell, choked on his own vomit because he was not allowed to use the medical marijuana that helps him to keep his nausea down. That's about as cruel and unusual a punishment as you can get. The 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment about the powers being held by the people, that the states should have the powers that aren't enumerated in the Constitution. The whole process of medical marijuana proves that is a lie under our federal Constitution. Medical marijuana that is not being sold interstate, that is not being used for commercial purposes, and yet the federal government comes and tramples on the rights of California and 13, 14 other states that have medical marijuana. The war on drugs is an affront to our Constitution, and when we come back from break, we're going to talk to Alan St. Pierre about that. We're going to get you progressives on board, ending the war on drugs. I'm Radical Russ. We're right back after this.
From pop culture to politics. Oh, yeah. All that other crap in between. This is the Bill Press Show.
Welcome Welcome back, listeners. Radical Russ Belville here, filling in for Bill Press. Our phone number is 866-55-PRESS. That's 866-55-77-377. And it is the Bill Press Show Goes to Pot.
Far out, man. I haven't seen a bong in years.
We're taking an in-depth look on 2 of the 250 days you get us on the radio. 2 days we're spending here on the war on drugs, the war on marijuana, and it's a topic that progressives are starting to fall behind on. You would think progressives would be saying the intelligent things about this issue, but it turns out that a lot of conservatives now are taking up the mantle. We played this clip for you yesterday, but let me give it to you again. This is Pat Robertson from the 700 Club with some of the most sensible things said about the war on drugs I've heard all year.
There's something else we've got to recognize. We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years. They've got mandatory sentences, and these judges just say, they throw up their hands and say, there's nothing we can do. There's mandatory sentences. We've got to take a look at what we're considering crimes, and that's one of them. I mean, I'm not exactly for the use of drugs. Don't get me wrong, but I just believe that criminalizing marijuana, criminalizing the possession of a few ounces of pot and that kind of thing, I mean, it's costing us a fortune, and it's ruining young people. Young people go into prisons, they come out, they go in as youths, and they come out as hardened criminals, and that's not a good thing.
Somebody check the temperature in hell, because I find myself agreeing with Pat Robertson. Joining us by telephone from the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws is an expert in the subject out there in Washington, D.C. He's seen the politics for going on 15 years now, working with the issues of marijuana and lobbying in our Congress. It's Alan St. Pierre. Alan, welcome to the show.
Good day, Russ.
I kind of framing this discussion today, since we're on the Bill Press Show, of course, we know NORML is a nonpartisan organization, and there's plenty of blame in the war on drugs to go around for both Democrats and Republicans. But I'd like to focus on progressives. We're a progressive talk show here, and we're talking to folks on the left side of the aisle. What would you like to say to these folks, these voters, as far as this war on drugs, this war on marijuana? Because it seems to me that conservatives are starting to steal the framing on this message.
Well, they are, and the Pat Robertson plug, if you will, was a left-handed endorsement of a new project by some libertarian-minded conservatives. The project is called RightOnCrime.com, and it is a mixture of libertarian and religious folks who come to the same issue from different reasons. And so, as you indicate, at NORML, we're more analytical than we are partisan. We don't care how they arrived at this conclusion, just really glad that they finally have. And so over the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a very concerted effort behind the scenes by folks like David Keene of the American Conservative Union and Grover Norquist of Americans for Tax Reform to build a right-of-center coalition, recognizing, sort of like Nixon to China, and knowing that no matter what happens in Congress, you always have to have some degree of bipartisanship. Well, they're forging that on the right now regarding reforming some aspects of the war on drugs.
Yeah, we've heard quotes coming out from Glenn Beck on his radio show. We've seen Sarah Palin address this, and people can point to them as being kind of the fringe of the right. But I see the right-wingers kind of setting up this frame for them to be able to point out how stupid, unproductive, what a waste of time. It fits in with their whole idea of reducing the deficit and eliminating wasteful government programs. And I'm afraid that Democrats, particularly Joe Biden and to some extent Barack Obama, are going to be left looking like the nanny state, looking like the old curmudgeons, which really shocks me, considering that it would seem to me that more Democrats, more people on the left side of the aisle have probably engaged in marijuana use in their youth than on the right side.
No doubt. In fact, when you listen to the Tea Party folks and you pare down the rhetoric, what do you hear? You basically hear one of the most cogent arguments against marijuana prohibition. They don't say it publicly, but if they have a prima facie example of a government program that doesn't work, something that people don't believe in, something that builds government way too large, puts government right into our homes, right into our bodies, that rhetoric works for them really, really well. And so it's been very frustrating over the many years I've been at NORML to see that progressives, generally speaking, have not really engaged in this issue that much. I mean, yes, The Nation magazine 2 weeks ago did a cover piece on the war on drugs. That would be the second or third one they've done in 15 years, so they certainly get credit. But then again, Time, Newsweek, even the National Review have all done cover pieces more or less criticizing the war on drugs. So not too vanguard there.
Yeah, and I think another thing progressives are missing is this new industry that is building up. We've seen the formation of a new lobbying group, the National Cannabis Industries Association. Both California and Colorado have burgeoning medical marijuana industries that are paying hundreds of millions of dollars in sales taxes, and these industries now have enough money to be able to pay lobbyists, pay for lobbying dollars. And we saw an example of that just a weekend ago, 2 weekends ago. I was in Denver, Colorado for the KushCon convention, 380 square feet of trade show convention, and on stage on a political panel we had former Republican New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, we have current Representative Jared Polis out of Colorado, and one of the Denver City Councilmen, Doug Linkhart, who's running for Denver mayor. 3 politicians on stage calling for the end of the war on drugs. What are progressives waiting for? What do they fear in jumping into this issue?
Well, many of them, and you mentioned one of them who's really a linchpin in all of this, but certainly his time in the limelight is past, is Joe Biden. Yes, he is the vice president, but he's also the progenitor of the ONDCP, the Drug Czar's office. He created the charter. And going back to the 1980s, Democrats, progressives, were getting shellacked over the issue of crime, weak on crime. So Biden and many of his contemporaries of the day decided that Democrats were going to go and double down on Reagan and the war on drugs. I mean, Reagan came up with a Partnership for Drug-Free America. Democrats came up with mandatory minimum sentencing. It just became a tit for tat. But both parties now realize, I mean, you have Charlie Rangel a couple of years ago. He was one of those architects of building up the war on drugs. He said marijuana should be decriminalized. You have folks on the right side of the issue, Dana Rohrabacher out in Orange County saying it should be legalized. So we are definitely getting to the point where it is very bipartisan, and progressives, one would assume, would be at the vanguard of this discussion.
We're speaking with Alan St. Pierre. He's the executive director of NORML and the NORML Foundation. That's the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Their website's available at norml.org. And Alan, moving forward here, we're looking at 2011. We've got a new Republican House coming into power, a somewhat weakened Democratic Senate coming into power in this next congressional term. What are the prospects at the federal level for any movement on marijuana or the war on drugs in general?
How would you like to hit the lottery today?
Well, maybe the Jim Webb bill we could talk about.
Yeah, well, to be clear, when it comes to straight-up marijuana law reform, as they say in the world of business, a pure play? No, there's no pure plays regarding marijuana coming up in this particular Congress. But Jim Webb's bill, which seems to be getting some bipartisan support, going back to the points we just made earlier, his commission wants to look at all of the federal crimes that are out there, what states have criminalized. There's no doubt that it's casting a jaundiced eye towards the war on some drugs. And one of the first priorities of NORML when Barack Obama got elected last year, realistically speaking, was to have a bipartisan commission, just like Nixon did in 1970, to recognize that this issue is a political hot potato, and commissions is one of the best ways to lead the legislature out of the wilderness.
Well, we can hope for that. We can encourage everyone, especially on the progressive side of the aisle, to speak to their congressmen, to their representatives at the state and federal level, and let them know this is a progressive issue. This is about ending racism. This is about supporting our constitutional rights and supporting this country. So get involved with it. Don't be afraid to tackle the issue. And for more information on it and all the alerts of what's going on in your state, you can check out norml.org. Alan St. Pierre is the executive director from NORML in Washington, D.C., and thanks for joining us today, Alan.
My pleasure. Take care, Russ.
Thank you. Coming up next, we're going to speak with Chris Goldstein from the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey. We're going to show you what a huge difference it makes when you vote or when you don't vote for a Democratic governor. New Jersey is the perfect example of what can go wrong in marijuana law reform when a Republican takes office. This is the Bill Press Show. I'm Radical Russ. We're right back after this.
Well, sir, you can't sell the marijuana to anybody. You need a reference from your doctor to show it's necessary. Oh, that's dumb.
Welcome back, folks. 47 after the hour. Radical Russ Belville here from NORML, filling in for Bill Press today. Bill will be back next week. Check him out in the first week of 2011 with more great news, talk, and interviews and information for you on the progressive side of the dial. Check out BillPressShow.com for more information. Our phone lines here are 866-55-PRESS. That's 866-55-77-377. We're talking about marijuana and specifically medical marijuana in this hour. And joining us by telephone from the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey. You can find them at cmmnj.com. It's Chris Goldstein. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Russ. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me this morning.
Glad to have you here. New Jersey was the 14th state to pass a medical marijuana law, and one of the few that did so through its legislature. Most of the successes in medical marijuana have come from mostly Western states that have the initiative process, and people can put this on the ballot. As it went through the legislature, it was, like things go through the sausage factory. It was changed and amended, and all sorts of things happened to it. But it was eventually signed by outgoing Governor Corzine, the Democrat. Incoming Governor Christie is the Republican. And this is where I wanted to turn it over to you, Chris, to examine here for our listeners, of course, on the progressive side of the dial here. What can go wrong when you don't vote for Democrats, when you don't vote for progressives, and how this has changed medical marijuana in the state of New Jersey? A lot of people got this and they thought, oh, good, we got medical marijuana. Fill them in on the nightmare that is New Jersey's medical marijuana.
Well, I'll tell you, Russ, it is amazing what a governor can do and the negative impact a governor can have on a medical marijuana law. And we have seen this in some other East Coast states. But in New Jersey specifically, yes. We had a Democrat, John Corzine. One of his last acts in office was to sign the Compassionate Use Medical Marijuana Law. It was the act at the time, into law. And, he knew he was already not elected at that point when he signed it. But the important thing about Corzine is that he supported medical marijuana access the whole way. He always said he would sign the bill if the legislature passed it. Now, that was, in my argument, that was a big reason why the legislature did indeed pass it last year. And, if they didn't feel that the governor was going to sign it, I'm not sure that the New Jersey legislature would have engaged in and supported it so positively. And they did. We're pointing out sort of a bit about the partisan politics, but what's important to keep in mind here is that in the New Jersey legislature, there was strong Republican support for medical marijuana. Last week I was reporting on a poll that Quinnipiac University put out, and they asked a question about medical marijuana recently along with Chris Christie, and support remained strong, 75% across all categories. So, it wasn't a partisan thing when they passed the bill. Corzine signed it. Christie came on in. Now, Governor Chris Christie is a former federal prosecutor. He's a U.S. attorney. And as a federal prosecutor, and this was pretty much his whole deal in civic service is being a U.S. attorney, he's been an aggressive, sort of headstrong kind of guy, and he's brought that into his governing style as New Jersey governor now. Now, Christie's walked a fine line here. He knows that the public supports medical marijuana. He sees the polls. I mean, even politicians that say they don't look at polls can't ignore 80%, of New Jersey residents supporting this law. So he's walked a fine line. Christie has always said that he thinks that sick and ill individuals, people who really need it, people who have debilitating medical conditions, Chris Christie believes that they should have access, legal access, to medical marijuana. Now, with some swift cognitive dissonance and some rather amazing political skill on Christie's part, he has also said he doesn't actually agree with the real law that we have to give people medical marijuana access. So he believes that people should have access, but he doesn't like the law that gives medical marijuana access here in New Jersey. And the governor's effect on this law has been profound.
We'll take a look at that, too. We got to take a quick break here, Chris. When we come back, we'll get more into depth as to what is it about the medical marijuana law Chris Christie doesn't like. You're listening to The Bill Press Show. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back, folks. Radical Russ Belville filling in here for Bill Press. And we're speaking with Chris Goldstein from the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey at cmmnj.com. And the results of New Jersey's medical marijuana law, a bipartisan law signed by a Democratic governor that is being thwarted, obstructed by the Republican governor, Chris Christie. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Russ.
Wonder if we could just follow up on what we were saying. How has Governor Christie obstructed this law?
Well, understand that New Jersey's governor is a very powerful position. It's probably one of the most powerful governorships in the country, has a lot of appointments. They did some realignments in New Jersey, but the Department of Health and Senior Services is the entity to implement the law. So through this entity, Governor Chris Christie has rolled out a new set of restrictions. Mind you, when New Jersey passed the law, it was lauded by the folks who passed it as being the most limited in the country. I mean, we only allow 2 ounces as a quantity per month. There's no home cultivation. We were the first state to do that, and that's unfortunate. And right now, what Governor Christie wants to do, he wants to limit that 2 ounces per month to 10% THC in the marijuana, only 3 strains of marijuana being grown, distributed at 6 centers, but wait, they can only get topical creams, lozenges, and raw plant material. Basically, we'd have the most Soviet-style, homogenized, stripped-down, sanitized marijuana program on the planet. And frankly, our argument is, well, hey, patients are getting better access right now in the underground market. The intent of the law is to give them legal access to what is comparatively available out there already. And unfortunately, Governor Christie just isn't getting it at this point.
Is this stance by Governor Christie anything new, or is this have political implications in him looking for some other higher office?
Well, I think it's a lot of reasons. I mean, New Jersey is a place where there's a lot of healthcare industry interest. I mean, 4 of the 7 largest pharmaceutical countries in the world are based here, and not for no reason. Just for the same reason you register a ship in Liberia, you base a pharmaceutical company in New Jersey. So, there's a lot of interest swirling around medical marijuana right now, and there was a big healthcare industry push to monopolize it this summer that Chris Christie and a couple of legislators were swinging around. But I'll tell you, Russ, what's very heartening right now is that Democrats and Republicans have joined together again, backed by super resounding public support. You'd have to write a law that gave every family a $100,000 check in the mail to get something more popular than medical marijuana at this point. So, backed by huge public support, Democrats and Republicans in the legislature are going for this resolution. So now it's not a partisan thing in New Jersey. It's Chris Christie versus the legislature in this sort of very complex constitutional debate that sort of gets down to the minutia of law. But what it comes down to is that patients, the real people who this law is meant to serve, the AIDS patients out there, the MS patients, people I interact with all year, every day, they are spending their time being more frustrated. And
it's a fascinating story, Chris. I'm sorry to have to cut you off. We've got to take a break. But coming up in our next, we're talking with Major Neil Franklin. We'll be right back after this. Welcome, everybody, to the Bill Press Show. I'm Radical Russ Belville from NORML, filling in for Bill on our 2 days of the Bill Press Show Goes to Pot.
Let's get out of here. I have some really good weed back at the hotel.
All right. And also, Bill will be back next week, the first week of 2011. He'll be in Sacramento at the inauguration of Governor Jerry Brown Monday and Tuesday. He'll be checking in from there, plus all you've come to expect from the Bill Press Show. Back next week, first week of 2011. Check it out. We're talking about the war on drugs, and when we talk about this, of course, we're talking about locking people up. We're talking about crime. We're talking about law enforcement. And so joining us by telephone here is a man who's an expert in the field. He is the head of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. You can find them at copssaylegalizdrugs.com. Major Neil Franklin, the executive director, is on the phone with us. And Neil, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Let's give people a little bit of your background. What is your background in drug law enforcement, and why are you an expert in this subject?
Well, I have 33 and a half years in law enforcement. I began back in the mid-'70s with the Maryland State Police, and I spent most of my career in narcotics enforcement. And around 1980, I went into undercover work. So I did some undercover work in the Washington, D.C. suburbs for a while, for a couple of years. And then I moved into management, and I managed a number of narcotics task forces in Maryland. As a lieutenant, in the western part of the state, I managed 7 narcotics task forces. These are multi-jurisdictional task forces, Maryland State Police, local police departments, sheriff departments. We even had some members of the DEA on our task forces. And then I moved to the other side of the state, and where we had combined criminal investigation task forces and narcotics task forces, and I had about 13 at that time in the 1990s. And so I spent most of my career with the Maryland State Police, either in criminal or narcotics investigation. And I ended my career as the commander of training for the Maryland State Police in 1999 before going to work for Baltimore, the Baltimore Police Department. And I went there. I was recruited to go there to be the commander of their training division, to rebuild their training division. And I stayed there for about 4 years and then moved on to the Maryland Transit Administration Police Department, where I went back into criminal enforcement, commanded their investigation bureau for a few years, and eventually retired.
So we got no doubt here that you've been on the front lines of the war on drugs. I mean, people will know the city of Baltimore as the setting for the HBO series The Wire, which focused a lot on the drug trade and what was going on there. So for our listeners out there, we're talking to a progressive audience, and one of my themes for these past couple of days is how progressives, Democrats, people on the left side of the aisle aren't taking this issue seriously enough. And I was wondering if you could explain to them, as someone who worked as a police officer, working in narcotics, why this war on drugs is a failure and why they need to take it more seriously.
Well, think about this. You know, it's been almost 4 decades since Nixon began this, and we liken this to alcohol prohibition back in the 1920s and into the early 30s, and it only took them 13 years to realize that prohibition didn't work back then. But talking about drug prohibition here, almost 4 decades, the goals were to reduce crime, addiction, disease, death. We haven't accomplished a single goal. Things are getting worse. We have more drugs coming into the country now, today, than ever before. Tonnage. And I say tonnage because we are talking tons. We're not talking pounds. Our addiction rates are extremely high. We have overdose rates that are extremely high. So, you know, we have people dying, but the violence associated with the illegal drug trade is unbelievable. In the past almost, 3.5 to 4 years in Mexico, close to 30,000 people murdered at the hands of the cartel. And this is about drug prohibition. It's not because we have a drug abuse problem in this country. It's because of prohibition. In our country, our neighborhood gangs and the drug violence that we have in our country is unbelievable. The federal government has said that the cartel are in over 230 cities here in the United States. That, with our drug gangs, our neighborhood drug gangs support themselves financially through illegal drug sales. And as you mentioned, the HBO series, The Wire, I tell people that is not a show for entertainment. What it is a documentary where the names have been changed. And I can speak to this because when I sit and watch that show, I know the people. I grew up with some of those people. I policed with some of those people. So I know that the series is true.
We're speaking again with Major Neil Franklin, the Executive Director of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, longtime narcotics detective and police officer in Maryland and in Baltimore. And as we discuss this, I've been on this show yesterday, and I got a lot of calls where people, and again, we'll be taking your calls, just by the way, at 866-55-PRESS, 866-55-77-377 in our next segment. But as I took some calls yesterday, I got some response from people that were like, yes, I completely support medical marijuana, or I believe that we should decriminalize maybe marijuana, but they couldn't go the full step of saying the L word, legalization. They couldn't go to that full step. Why is legalization more important or more necessary than just decrim or medical marijuana?
Well, that is the only way that we will solve this. And look, we're not talking about something that's going to be this grandiose problem solver here. What we're talking about is the lesser of two evils. I mean, we in LEAP, we don't believe that any of these drugs are good for you, including the ones that are illegal today, such as alcohol. We know alcohol is the worst of them all. However, in order to make things better than what they are, we have to end prohibition. And when you force something underground, a number of things happen. Number one, we just talked about the violence. Okay, that's a given. We know the violence from this illegal drug trade. But then you have substances, heroin, cocaine, or what have you, that where there's no standards. Our kids, the federal government has said that drugs are more accessible today than ever before. Why is that? It's because that the criminals do not ask for identification when someone wants to buy a drug. They don't care how old you are. All they want to see is the money. So it's more accessible to our kids today than ever before. There are no standards. We don't know what people are buying. Drugs would not be as dangerous as they are today if they were in the legal market. But when you leave it in the hands of criminals do whatever they have to do to get you addicted and to keep you addicted. We don't have the money to spend on treatment because we're spending so much money in law enforcement in other areas. We can't spend money on education because we're spending it in law enforcement, in prisons, in the judicial system. We need to refocus our priorities towards education and treatment, period. We shouldn't be trying to enforce, and I use it, this isn't a moral issue, but people will say that it is, but I think it's immoral to be putting so many people in prison, but state enforcement of someone's behavior for taking a substance does not work. We need to approach this strictly from an education and health perspective, as we do with alcohol, and start arresting people and putting people in prison for their actions as relates to crimes against other people, not what they decide to use for themselves.
Fantastic analysis. Neil Franklin with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Let's talk about the law enforcement side of these things. You mentioned the Mexican drug war, what's going on down there, and there's been a lot of corruption of Mexican officials, government officials, of Mexican law enforcement. There's a saying they have down there, plata o plomo, which is silver or lead. You can take the bribe or you can take the bullet. How much of that corruption, though, in the drug war has extended to American law enforcement?
Well, absolutely. It is different. It is a little different. As you said, first they offer you money in Mexico, and if you don't accept the money, then they send you a photograph in the mail of your family, and you know what that's about. In the United States, it's about money. It's about money, except for those members of the cartel who are here, and as I mentioned before, over 230 cities. They still have the pressure from their families being back into Mexico, so they're going to do what they're told to do here in the United States. But for those citizens here in the United States, those police officers, those public officials, money is still a great motivator. And we have so much of it. I know of police officers that are now in prison because of corruption. Public officials who have been sent to prison because of corruption. And it is a big problem here in the United States. Not as bad as in Mexico, but it is a problem. This illegal drug trade, this issue of prohibition has driven a wedge between police and community that is unbelievable. It is the foundation of racial profiling in this country. And I just want to speak to this real quick. We did a workshop, a friend of mine and I did a workshop in a prison for juveniles here in Baltimore a few months ago. And it was 12 boys who were in prison, and it's like a high school, but they're awaiting their trial. And most of them were in there for drug offenses, for selling drugs. And we asked them a series of questions, but one of the questions we asked is, what would your neighborhoods be like in Baltimore if drugs were legal tomorrow? And, of course, the number one answer was we'd have no money, because they realized that they understand that that's how most of the people in their communities make money. But their second answer was that we would not be harassed by the police. And they all agreed to this. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, well, the police only come into our communities, into our neighborhood, to search us for drugs, to search our homes for drugs, and to harass us about drugs. And I said, well, don't they come into your community to deal with other crimes? He says, yeah. When they do, they're usually extremely late, and they have an attitude as though they don't give a rat's butt. So in order for us to better our relationships between police and community, one of the first things we have to do, once again, is end prohibition.
Yeah, absolutely. Major Neil Franklin with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Check out the website, copssaylegalizedrugs.com. They have an entire speakers bureau. You can get a LEAP speaker in your town to tell folks the truth from a cop's point of view about why we need to end the war on drugs. Neil, thanks so much for joining us here on the Bill Press Show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to be taking your calls at 866-55-PRESS, 866-55-77-377. We're talking the war on drugs. I'm Radical Russ Belville. We're right back after this. Welcome back, folks. Russ Belville filling in for Bill Press. Bill will be back with you next week, and he will be at the inauguration of Governor Jerry Brown on Monday and Tuesday in Sacramento. Checking in live from California. That should be a lot of fun. We're taking your calls here at 866-55-PRESS. That's 866-55-77-377. Our topic today, are progressives missing the boat here on the issue of marijuana legalization and ending the war on drugs? The conservatives are starting to make a lot of noise about this. They're starting to say things that make a whole lot of sense, and it kind of bothers me that progressives aren't jumping on this bandwagon. Let me give you this one here. This is a quote from Governor Gary Johnson addressing the idea of drug war incarceration.
Half of what we spend on law enforcement, half of what we spend on the courts, and half of what we spend on the prisons is drug-related. And to what end? Well, we're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country on drug-related crime. We have 4 times the incarceration rate on a percentage basis of any country in the world. In second place is New Zealand. 4 times. We have, 2.4 million people in this country incarcerated.
Yeah, that's former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. He's headed up the Our America Initiative, and a lot of people saying this is a shadow run of his for the Republican nomination for president. But there he is saying sensible things about the war on drugs, the need to end the imprisonment of Americans. 2.3 million Americans behind bars. We lead the world not only in the rate of imprisonment, but overall numbers. We have the most prisoners overall of any country in the world. 2.3 million prisoners. The next closest is China. Red China, communist China, the dastardly Chinese, only imprison 1.6 million of their own people, compared to 2.3 million here in the United States of America, the land of the free. In fact, the United States imprisons about as many people as the number 2 and number 3 countries combined. That's China and the Russian Federation. We also imprison about as many people in America as the number 5 through number 20 countries combined, and we imprison as many people in America as the number 21 through 218th countries combined. This is not what the land of the free is all about. The other thing about the war on drugs that is so troubling to me is how it colors our interpretation and investigation of other crimes, especially when we start looking at the media and their tendency to focus on the reefer madness elements of a case. I pulled this up from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution just this morning, and the headline reads, DA, District Attorney, stepdad accused of smoking pot around 3-year-old. Oh, accused of smoking pot around 3-year-old. This is the headline that they broadcast. But when you actually look up the story, the police report that it's based on, the smoking of pot around the 3-year-old had nothing to do with what the actual story was about. The story had to do with a 3-year-old who had fallen into an unresponsive state, and the stepdad tried to get her under cold water to revive her, and she ended up having to go to the hospital to try to take care of the child. And according to the police here, that says in the Albany Democrat Herald, police have charged Jones with 1 count of misdemeanor reckless conduct in that police believe he had previously smoked or possessed marijuana in the child's presence. But for now, the reckless conduct charge is not directly connected to the child's death. Right? The smoking of marijuana had nothing to do with this child's death, yet the Atlanta Journal-Constitution leads the story with stepdad smoked pot around 3-year-old. This is the amount of how ludicrous these stories become. Anytime there's any marijuana involved, they want to point to the marijuana as being the shocking part of the story. Had this stepdad been a guy who, comes home from work and drinks a Coors Light or 2, and that had nothing to do with the child's death, they wouldn't have even mentioned the beer being drank. But since marijuana is so illegal and so deadly dangerous, Schedule 1 drug, that's what the scaremongering story leads with. It's ridiculous, and it needs to end. All right, coming back, we're going to talk with Miko Hester-Perez on childhood autism.
It's the Bill Press Show.
Welcome back, folks. Radical Russ Belville from NORML, filling in for Bill Press here on our 2 days of the Bill Press Show Goes to Pot.
Hey, this is great, man.
And we've talked to all sorts of people about this issue, law enforcement, activists, patients. We spoke yesterday to all sorts of folks on the issue, but today we're going to take a look at mothers and families and children with regard to the issue of medical marijuana. And joining us by telephone here is the founder of the Unconventional Foundation for Autism. She's a woman, a very brave woman. You may have seen her on some of the morning talk shows about this subject. Miko Hester-Perez joins us. Miko, welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning, Russ.
Let's fill in, folks, a little bit about your background. People may know you as the mother who appeared on the morning talk shows, and about your son who suffers from a severe form of autism, and your choice to treat him with medical marijuana, a very controversial choice. Tell folks about your background and how medical marijuana has helped your son.
Well, about a year and a half ago, Joey weighed 42 pounds and was diagnosed with anorexia and malnutrition, second to his autism. It was a very, the day I heard that Joey had 6 months to live, due to the medications that were associated with autism, at the time he was taking quite a few medications. Just like any mother, I couldn't bear. I felt like I've gotten this far. I'm not going to lose my son. And so I'm a legal researcher, and this just happened to be one of my biggest projects.
Okay. And how severe was Joey's autism? What was it like on a day-to-day basis before medical marijuana?
Well, Joey had a lot of behavioral issues in school. He was very, very thin due to the medications. My life was extremely stressful. I have 2 other children. I was really fearful for my other 2 children. I had a horrible life.
Yeah, so it's really tough, raising a child who has autism. And, of course, people may not be aware, but autism incidences are now about 1 in 150 live births. It's very prevalent in America these days. The symptoms can be very severe. Children can act out. They can have violent episodes. You mentioned the anorexia. So what then led you to think that medical marijuana might be a solution, and how did you go about implementing it?
At the time, after the appointment, I was only trying to treat the anorexia and malnutrition, and it was simply a joke. I came home and I said, you know what, this is what I think Joey really needs. And then 3-4 seconds later, I was researching it, and I said, I couldn't believe at the results I was seeing with other children that were placed on medical marijuana, as well as other doctors that were seeing their patients. And after I had compiled all of this information to take to his psychiatrist, whether she said yes or no, this is what I was going to do to save my son's life. Now, thankfully, for the very first time in 10 years, I had found a doctor who was actually able to preserve my son's life with me.
And you're in a state where medical marijuana is legal, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So now people are going to hear this, and they're going to say, oh, my God, this mother is giving her autistic son medical marijuana. They're sitting back there firing up hits from the bong. No. Tell them what the reality is.
The reality is Joey takes the cannabis in edibles. What I've done is on the website, us4a.org, is I've shown you that this is not only responsible, but it saves lives.
Mm-hmm. How has Joey improved under medical marijuana? Has it worked better for him than the conventional medications?
You have no idea. I'm working with multiple doctors right now, and there's other doctors who are writing case study on Joey. One of those doctors is Dr. Lester Greenspoon, who's very highly regarded in the cannabis community, but as well as conservative doctors are now looking at this
Lester Greenspoon's a Harvard emeritus, by the way, so, the guy's got credentials.
Yes, he does. What immediately in my home, and this is something you don't see very often, is my son sharing with my 2-year-old just the results that we're seeing at school with his behavior that's now been documented. They can't believe it. Joey last year to current, the collected data is unbelievable.
Wow.
For those who were skeptics, they're no longer skeptics.
Yeah, sounds like it. Now, we're speaking with Miko Hester Perez. She's the founder of the Unconventional Foundation for Autism. The website is uf4a.org, uf4a.org. And I understand that you're not now the only woman who has found medical marijuana as a treatment for their child. How many more people can you estimate are using medical marijuana for their children?
Well, let's just say I have a nationwide connection with mothers. Every day the following is growing, and I couldn't even, there's hundreds of parents. Every time that I'm on a platform such as your radio station or this show, the next day I get an overwhelming amount of emails and phone calls, and that's the one thing that I love to do is I take these phone calls myself.
Yeah. Well, let me play devil's advocate here a little bit, because I talk to lots of people about these issues, and I know that there's got to be someone out there thinking, medical marijuana, it might make the kid feel better, but so would giving him a cough syrup to knock him out or something like that. Tell folks about medically what this is doing. This isn't just about him feeling better.
No, it's not a miracle. It's science. There's more scientific evidence to support cannabis as a safe and effective treatment with brain trauma, and we all know that brain trauma is autism. So what I'm doing with the foundation, as well as with multiple doctors, is bringing that science out. There's more science here than there is industry and recreational. There's in 13 medications. Cannabis has been the only medication that has been effective with my son. And I hear it from other parents that call me and say, you know what, we tried it too, and we see it.
It's got to be tough, standing out like this as a pioneer. I imagine you must have detractors. You must have people out there that don't believe in what you're doing or feel like you're leading people astray. How has this been for you personally, coming out as an activist and standing up for the use of medical marijuana for autistic children?
Well, I had my father actually didn't understand, and it was very personal. For my father to not speak with me, to not really understand why I chose cannabis. And being that I'm not a cannabis user, and I was doing whatever it took to save my son's life. Not until recently, when my father came over to visit, and for the very first time, Joey had interaction with my father, to see the tears in his eyes, and he felt ashamed that he had went against his daughter and his daughter's research.
Well, it's good that, he found the time, the time happened that he was able to see the truth about this, and it sounds like things are going well for you and Joey. We wish you all the luck in the world with the Unconventional Foundation for Autism, uf4a.org. The founder, Miko Hester Perez, you're a brave woman, and thanks for joining us on the Bill Press Show.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to be taking your calls here at 866-55-PRESS. What are your opinions on the war on drugs? Are progressives missing the boat on this one? Are we falling behind? Sounds like the conservatives are starting to take this issue from us. We'll take your calls right after this. Welcome back, my friends. 46 after the hour. Radical Russ Belville here, filling in for Bill Press today. You'll get Rich Masters tomorrow and Thursday, and then next week, Bill Press is back with you for the beginning of 2011. And we're talking about my area of expertise, the war on drugs, and specifically this segment, I want to talk a little bit about medical marijuana. Invariably, when I do these shows, the response that I get from progressives on the phone is something to the effect of, well, of course I completely support medical marijuana. but I don't know about this legalization. And what I want people to understand is that medical marijuana is second-class citizenship. Medical marijuana is Jim Crow. Medical marijuana is treating sick people differently because of their particular choice of medication. Now, let me give you some examples. In my show, Back with NORML at NORML Show Live, you can reach us live.normal.org, 1 p.m. Pacific every day. I interviewed lots of these patients. One particular lady that I interviewed is a woman by the name of Kathy Jordan. Now, Kathy Jordan was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. You may know this better as Lou Gehrig's disease, a progressive wasting neuro disease that basically has you dying within inside your own body. Your body you basically lose control of your own body over time. You may know this of Professor Stephen Hawking from the wheelchair, an ALS survivor. When she was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Kathy Jordan was told that she would have about 3 years to live. And over those intervening 3 years, she found her condition deteriorating. She was given all manner of pharmaceutical drugs, all the conventional drugs and treatments to deal with ALS. None of these helped. She continued to degrade. Fast forward through those 3 years, and she was finally, it was suggested by a friend that she try a joint of marijuana, that she would try to smoke a joint. And she was amazed when she smoked that joint how her tremors quelled and her pain subsided. She was absolutely amazed by this. And she decided that, well, I'm going to die anyway. None of these other drugs will work, and I'll quit using them because they have these terrible side effects, and I'll use medical marijuana. That was 1989. That was 1989 when she was diagnosed with 3 years to live. Since then, Kathy Jordan is alive and well, 30 years later, 20 years later, whatever it is, using medical marijuana to survive her ALS. The doctors say it's a miracle. I say it's natural. Let's go to the phones here. We've got Tom in West Dundee. Tom, welcome to the program.
Good morning.
What's on your mind, Tom?
Yeah, my thing is that, with all this medical marijuana, there's not a lot of research. The growers that have been growing this and supplying it to sick patients, the government, once it becomes fully legal, I feel that, as a lot of other growers do, that they'll try and take this out of our hands and bring it into big government, give it to Bayer, Pfizer, and synthesize this tetrahydrocannabinol in the pills.
You've definitely got a point there. First of all, let me correct you on one thing, though. There is a ton of research on medical marijuana. There's over 17,000 published studies on cannabinoids and their use. But you do have a point in that the government is aware of this. They have a patent number 6630507. Look it up, patentstorm.us. They have a patent on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants. They also have 4 patients enrolled in a federal medical marijuana program since 1978 that are still receiving U.S. government medical marijuana from the federal marijuana farm. So, yes, the government knows this is medicine.
Right. They know, and us as growers, we would like to keep it in our hands to supply it with our patients and keep the money in our hands as opposed to letting the government take this money and spend it any way.
But, Tom, doesn't that mean leaving it illegal and throwing people in prison for it?
No, sir. It means keeping it medicinal and medical and allowing the growers to supply the patients. We've known this for years, and now the government's trying to get their hand in it because they see they can make a lot of money off of it.
There's that too, but let's look at this point of view from it. I think a lot of people, when they look at medical marijuana and they think of it as a whole bunch of independent, untaxed, unregulated, uninspected growers out there that are supplying what's supposed to be considered medicine to very sick and frail patients. Now, I'm not saying that you are a bad grower or that most of the growers are bad, but shouldn't there be some level of regulation and control over this so that we're not, sending out cannabis with molds or mites or any of those problems?
I absolutely agree with you, and that is certainly a big problem and a big issue. They need to come up with some kind of floor mat where they inspect these farms, and just like milk, like foods, the FDA, everything, inspect the farms and leave the farms open to inspections, but they should keep it in the hands of the people and not let big government take this over.
Okay, Tom, I think I can find some agreement with you on that, because the one thing I don't want medical marijuana turning into is Pfizer, is Big Pharma, Eli Lilly, barcodes, markups, and we're starting to see that. And by the way, thanks for your call, Tom. I appreciate it. I do have to move on here, but we are starting to see that. There is a whole plant extract known as sativa T-Vex that is being tested. It's been approved in Britain and Canada and a couple other countries, I believe. A whole plant extract. So we're not talking about the synthetic THC dronabinol marinol pill where it's just one aspect of cannabis, the THC. It actually includes all the aspects of cannabis, the THC, and there's a whole bunch of others. There's CBD, CBG, CBN, CBL, CBGB, the cannabidabidoo. I mean, there's a million of them in the plant, right? But they all have medicinal benefit. We are starting to see that. This is a sublingual spray. It's sprayed under the tongue. There's also development of special THC inhalers that are underway right now. So yes, the pharmaceuticalization of cannabis is coming. But in my mind, if people can grow it themselves and take care of it themselves and do so much more cheaply and not having to pay the exorbitant markups that we find in pharmaceutical medications, that's the way it needs to stay. That's the beauty of medical marijuana, is people can treat themselves, and it takes us away from the paradigm of Western medicine that we have to have some doctor's permission and some factory manufactured pharmaceutical to treat ourselves. We can do it with plants. We can do it with cannabis if the government would just get out of our way. I'm Radical Russ Belville, filling in for Bill Press. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with more of your calls at 866-5577-377. See you in a minute. Welcome back, folks. Just a couple minutes here to round out the hour, and really, Last Dance with Mary Jane. You guys are picking these songs just for me, aren't you?
Look,
yes, of course.
When I was a kid, I inhaled frequently. That was the point.
And the point is, Mr. President, had you been caught for inhaling frequently, today you'd be Barry the drug criminal. It's time to end this stupid war on drugs. It's obvious that marijuana use didn't harm Barack Obama any. Why should any of the rest of us be locked up for it? Welcome back. I'm Radical Russ Belville here, filling in for Bill Press. And I wanted to tell you really briefly here about federal medical marijuana. You may not know it, but there is such a thing as federal medical marijuana. In 1978, Robert Randall sued the federal government. He was a glaucoma patient. He said, if I don't smoke pot, I will go blind. And I need an affirmative defense here that breaking the law is not as harmful to me as not breaking the law. He won the case, and the federal government created the Compassionate Investigative New Drug Program just for him. An entire government agency just for this one man who won the lawsuit. And at the University of Mississippi, they began growing marijuana to supply this one man with medical marijuana. Soon, other patients followed with lawsuits to the point there was 13 patients on this program receiving federal medical marijuana. 4 of these patients still survive today, including Irv Rosenfeld, a stockbroker in Florida, and Elvie Musica, who's a retired woman here in my home state of Oregon. They still receive 9 ounces of federal medical marijuana every month in a big tin that comes from the University of Mississippi's federal pot farm. And yet the federal government wants to tell us there is no medicinal value to marijuana. They have an entire government agency set up for it, sending medical marijuana to 4 living Americans, but they want to claim there's no medical marijuana. And why are there only 4 Americans on that program? Because in 1992, Bush the Smarter closed the program because all the AIDS patients for California were starting to register with it. Closed it down to turn down the AIDS patients to let them suffer. That's the story of federal medical marijuana. Look it up. It's on the net. Check out NORML.org. I'm Radical Russ. We're right back for our next hour after this. Welcome back, everyone. Radical Russ Belville here, filling in for Bill Press today. It's our last hour of the Bill Press Show Goes to Pot.
Oh, gnarly. What are you people? On dope?
No, we're not on dope. And don't call it dope. It's cannabis. Glad to have you here. Again, I'm Russ Belville from NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And I want to give big thanks to Bill Press Show and everybody producing the show for giving us this opportunity to go in depth on this topic for a couple of days. Like I said at the beginning of this yesterday, you know, the progressive side of the dial is generally supportive of ending the war on drugs, but we don't talk about it much. We seem to be afraid to talk about it, afraid of being portrayed as soft on crime. And one of the things that will always be thrown into our face is, my goodness, what about the children? What kind of message would we be sending to the children if we legalized marijuana? So I figured, as a childless man, I would bring someone into the debate here who would have a little bit more expertise on the subject. She is the executive director of NORML New Jersey and a practicing family law attorney in New Jersey. Please welcome Ann Davis to the program. Ann, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Russ. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. And you're a mother, and how old are your children now?
17 and 6. if weed is legal, which we all hope it will be one day, you have to just teach your children about any substance that's out there, sex or drugs, whatever it is. You have to have a relationship with your child. It's not, prohibition is not the answer. It's being an active parent in your child's life. That's the answer.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable on so many levels, not just the marijuana issue. We're speaking again to Ann Davis. She's the executive director of NORML, New Jersey, and a practicing family law attorney. I want to turn the conversation to that subject, family law. You deal with people that are going through divorces and child custody and all of these issues that we find in family law. How does the issue of marijuana affect family law cases in America today?
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible. Well, there's two different aspects of it. First, there's the people that get infiltrated by the Division of Youth and Family Services. And those aren't necessarily custody cases between the parents, but that's, somebody called and said, hey, this parent is using marijuana, and DICE comes in, investigates. And there's been some bad cases. They can have as much as a joint, test positive, and before you know it, you've got this division coming in, taking your children from you. And, ultimately, you get them back once you prove you're a fit parent, and you've got Aunt Susie to come take over and supervise your incompetent parenting until you can prove yourself. It's a horrible, horrible system, and it is not in the best interest of the children to have a great parent who otherwise goes to work, keeps the house, kids are all, in check, good grades, but just use itself as is enough in the state of New Jersey to bring the division into your life, and it's really not a pretty situation at all. Then the second situation are in the custody battles, and they're horrific. I cannot even tell you. I have a case right now pending. Wonderful dad, 25-year marriage. He was the one that took the kids off the bus every afternoon, took them to soccer, did their homework. He worked. Beautiful home. Now they're getting divorced. He's not able to have his kids unsupervised because of his marijuana use. And we've got to fight the fight every step of the way to show he's a competent parent so that he can see his kids unsupervised. The man who, and they're older children now, I want to say like 16, 18, 20, but it's really the 16-year-old that's the key right now. But it's just a horrible situation. The whole thing is a horrible situation.
Do we have situations in these cases when we're talking about child custody where alcoholism comes into play? And if so, if alcohol is a reason for keeping kids away from their parents or to have, supervised visits, do they have to go to some length to prove that their use of alcohol is harmful, unlike marijuana use?
Well, they have to go through substance abuse evaluations. They do, and they do random testing for alcoholics as well as they do for people that use marijuana. But point being, I've had cases, unfortunately, where alcoholics are driving with their kids in the car, and that's a real serious situation. But frequent marijuana use where it's not affecting the children whatsoever, it shouldn't even be a factor considered in custody. And there have been some cases, fortunately, across the country where judges have held that the marijuana use is not detrimental to the children whatsoever, and it has nothing to do with their parental skills. So we are seeing a shift in some places across the country, and there was one in New Jersey recently where we had a very merciful judge, epileptic woman, having seizures. She was using them to control the seizures, and piled her with all of the scientific data, and this judge kind of went around the normal procedures and system to allow this woman her continued use without it affecting her parental rights. But you don't see that as common as we should, and I hope as the more we educate people, the more they learn about marijuana, that you'll see more judges having this shift of a mindset. But, we still have a few of the good old boys on the bench, and that's what we have to deal with. And until prohibition ends, it's not in the best interest of the children when you have a normal functioning family to have other people coming into the family to take control of the children and to watch what these parents have to go through just to be able to see their children. Not in the best interest of the children at all.
All right. One final question here with regard to women and marijuana. The most recent Gallup poll showed 46% support nationwide for legalization of marijuana, very broadly defined. Just legalization was the term they used. But when they broke that down by gender, men supported legalization at 51%. Women were 10 points behind at 41%. Now, there's a phenomenon we've identified in the cannabis movement, the stiletto stoner phenomenon. We're talking about young professional women who are now coming coming out of the closet and admitting their marijuana use. How do you see this fight changing for marijuana legalization, and how are we planning to bring women on board to this issue?
Well, we've seen more and more women stepping out, being more public about it, and I think that's a key factor. The women have more fear than men. It's true when it comes to being vocal about their position on cannabis and prohibition, and that's what the NORML Women's Alliance has been doing, trying to spread the message across the country that it's okay. It's okay to speak out about it. In fact, we want you to speak out about it, and we'll be there to support you. And more women every single day are coming on board saying, you know, I want to join, I want to help, I want to be the voice. So we are seeing more women wanting to vocalize more, and the more that the media has been putting cannabis mainstream, I think the more women are becoming very comfortable about it. You see it everywhere now. Every major network, newspaper, radio station, it's okay to talk about cannabis, and it's good to talk about cannabis, and you are seeing many, many more become vocal about it.
Excellent. Well, Ann Davis is the executive director of NORML New Jersey. Check them out at NORMLNJ, NORMLNJ.org. Also a practicing family law attorney in Brick, New Jersey. Ann, thank you so much for joining us here on the Bill Press Show.
Thank you, Russ.
All right, folks, when we come back, we'll take more of your calls. We got a couple of callers hanging on the line right this minute at 866-55-PRESS. That's 866-55-77-377. I'm Radical Russ. We're right back after this.
So, by the way, when it comes to pot, you know, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball.
That's former drug czar Barry McCaffrey. Hey, wait a minute. I'm in my 40s. I live in Oregon. Hooray! I can have a dozen giant pot plants in my backyard. All right, that's good news for me. Radical Russ Belville here, filling in for Bill Press here on the Bill Press Show. Bill will be back with you this coming Monday, the first week of 2011, bringing you some call-ins, also live coverage from Governor Jerry Brown's inauguration. He'll be calling in from Sacramento on Monday and Tuesday. Check that out. We got some calls on the line here at 866-55-PRESS, 866-55-77-377. We're talking about the war on drugs. Let's go to Matt in Petoskey, Michigan. Matt, welcome to the show.
Yeah, good morning, Russ. First of all, I'd like to say that I missed your old Saturday show.
Oh, thank you.
I was glad I got to say hello to Stevie this morning. Anyway, here in Michigan, because the economy is so horrible, you know, people are just desperate for any kind of way to get something going. And there's a tremendous amount of interest in medical marijuana, the growing of marijuana, and also hemp. And my concern is that, you know, pot's going to get legal within the next 5 or 15 years, just like gay marriage is going to become legal.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm afraid that Kathleen Cook or Budweiser, or you mentioned Pfizer a few minutes ago, wants to keep these big corporations from just taking the whole industry over, because this is a tremendous opportunity for small growers to make a decent living.
Yeah.
And I'm fearful there's nothing that can be done to protect them. And I don't know if you have any ideas or suggestions. Or
yeah, I do. You know, I think a legalized marijuana market can be built with an eye toward keeping it small. I think one of the things that our opponents are going to have a problem with is, you know, if marijuana turns into the next Budweiser, and there's advertisements for it everywhere, and there's product placements for it everywhere, and, you know, it's kind of promoted with a sexy type of advertising scheme. I think people are going to be against that generally, and so I think there will be more restrictions on the marijuana market once it's legal. But I do also think there'll be a comparison to the alcohol market in that we have these major, what you might call macro breweries, Coors, Miller, Budweiser, and they produce, mass-produced cheap beer that most people are fine with. But there's also a burgeoning craft beer movement. I mean, I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon, where, you know, we have the most craft breweries, microbreweries per capita of any city in the United States. Denver, Colorado has more overall than any city, and both cities are very much steeped in the marijuana culture. There's always going to be a market for hand-grown, well-trimmed, manicured marijuana. When these big companies want to put marijuana marijuana together. They're going to do it in big, industrial-sized farms, and they're not going to pay attention to the individual plant. And marijuana plants are cannabis plants are very particular. You could grow 4 of them under the same lights, but one of them will be strong and 3 of them will not be so good. They're not going to have that detail. They're just going to harvest them all, and put them all into the same hopper, so to speak. And it'll be mid-grade. It'll be okay. Some people will like it, but there'll always be a market for the hand-grown, well-trimmed, what we might call boutique marijuana from the small growers.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and listening to you, I actually deliver as part of my job to a specialty brewery here, a microbrewery here in northern Michigan, and actually they just won an award as one of the most successful businesses. So, maybe you're right, that specialty market, similar to kind of like specialty coffees can develop, and allow people to make a decent living and not have to work for somebody else.
Yeah, I think it can definitely happen. Thank you for your call, Matt. And I know in Michigan this is a big issue with the new medical marijuana industry that's cropped up there. You can pardon the pun. We're taking calls here at 866-55-PRESS, 866-55-77-377. And let's go to Will in Placentia, California. Will, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How you doing? I have a couple of quick questions. I wanted to get them both out, so I'll try and be quick about it. A couple of loudmouth recreational users have been giving me grief. I've been 10 years legal here in California. My doctor, Frank Lucida, went to the court for the right case and stuff, and I've been involved in this almost every day. I'm totally lost by the people who tried to pass this last law just for the reasons your last caller stated of big business grabbing a hold and screw the little guy. They were going to continue the criminal stuff with the new law.
Okay, and what's your second question?
Second question, I just wanted to announce, thank you, Allison, my attorney, totally saved my ass here in a medical marijuana, the LA chapters of NORML.
All right, I will get to those questions. Let's see what we can do here. As far as the recreational users, and I do believe he's referring to Prop 19, which was the California initiative to legalize marijuana. It failed with 46% of the vote, but it did get the greatest amount of support of a statewide legalization initiative. And this was something that they attempted here in 2010, an off-year election, which is never a good election year to be going and trying to pass something progressive. Usually you want to do these things in presidential election years when more younger voters are out. Votes tend to go more progressively. As far as the recreational users infringing or impinging on what's going on with medical marijuana, I'm afraid the medical users are just going to have to get used to it because 90% of the people that use marijuana are not medical users. And so long as those 90% are treated like criminals, the 10% who are legitimate medical users will always face obstacles. They will always face being treated like criminals until they're proven to be patients. They will always face the high black market pricing of marijuana. They'll always face this extra scrutiny and these ridiculous limits on plants and possession. Let's legalize it for everyone so the medical users can get the full benefit from cannabis. I'm Radical Russ. We'll take more of your calls when we come back from break. Stick around. It's the Bill Press Show. Welcome back, listeners. Radical Russ Melville here from the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. In our last half hour of the Bill Press Show Goes to Pot.
But isn't marijuana or dope illegal?
Only for those who enjoy it. Medical use of marijuana is legal in this state.
I always like playing that clip. Only for those who enjoy it. Hey, you smoking a joint. Are you sick? Oh, all right. Never mind. Hey, you smoking a joint. You're not sick? Off to jail with you. It's kind of a strange situation, don't you think? We're taking your calls here at 866-55-PRESS, 866-55-77-377. Waiting on the line here in my hometown, Portland, Oregon, is Joe. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hi, Russ. Hey, I'd like to pass along some reality to all the people that are listening, is that in over 30 years as an EMT, I went on one call related to marijuana. Went on hundreds and hundreds of calls related to alcohol, nicotine, prescription drugs, so on and so forth. And the violence caused by the alcohol. I mean, the bar fights, for crying out loud. And if you're out like at a baseball game or a outdoor concert or something, who's the person that's rowdy and getting in trouble and causing a ruckus? It's the drunk.
Yeah, I do the Seattle Hemp Fest every year. It's the third weekend of August, and it's the world's largest hemp festival. It's 1.6 miles of public park, anywhere from 150,000 to 200,000 attendees. No alcohol is sold on site, but there's plenty of cannabis smoking going on. And I talk to the cops who are wandering up and down, usually mounted police, or they have some walking police that are wandering through the park. And I ask them, every year I ask them, would you rather be here at Seattle Hemp Fest, or would you rather be working Quest Field for a Seahawks game? And to a man, every police officer, and to a woman too, they all say, no, would rather work Hemp Fest. It's much rowdier at the Quest Field for the Seahawks game, even though it's like half to a third the people because of the alcohol being served.
Oh, yeah, it's just, puts the old loudmouth in gear, and these people just become uncontrollable in some cases. But I also had a request. Oh, by the way, that one cannabis call that I went on, it was a total non-issue. Two young people, they were roommates. Both of them had used the same kind of weed. The one said, well, I don't know what her problem is. I had the same stuff, too. And they're both female roommates. And anyway, we took her vitals. They were perfect.
Yeah.
She wasn't flipped out. She wasn't freaking out. We said, well, what seems to be the problem, miss? And she goes, oh, I don't know. I just kind of feel a little bit different. And I had the request I had, which this reminds me, could you kind of explain to the uneducated masses out there, and I don't know much about this either other than just one little bit I've seen on Cannabis Common Sense on Friday nights on local cable access here in Portland, but could you explain to them the differences between the cannabis indica, the cannabis sativa, the different blends of the combinations of the two, and
sure. Yeah,
one particular strain might be great for multiple sclerosis, and the next one might be great for ADHD, and the next one might be great for nausea.
Yeah. Well, Joe, let me get to that.
Give them an education about that, including myself, because I'd like to know more about it myself.
Sure. And Joe, thanks for your call. We appreciate that and all the work you do as an EMT. Basically the cannabis plant, what we call marijuana, has three different subspecies. There's cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, and cannabis ruderalis. Sativas are known for being more THC dominant, which means that they provide more of a psychological high. The heady high is what some people refer to it as, whereas the cannabis indicas tend to be more of a body high, what they call couch lock, that feeling of being very sedated. And when it comes to, and ruderalis is a third species that's really used more for crossbreeding purposes. It's not much of a medicinal or recreational species. The difference for medical use basically means those people that are suffering from some sort of mental or seizure disorder, where we're talking about PTSD, anxiety, depression, Alzheimer's, agitation, and so forth, would do better with a sativa dominant strain in that the THC is going to help those mental conditions better. People that are dealing with pain or spasticity or especially neuropathic pain can do better with a cannabis indica. The cannabis indica contains more of what's called CBD, cannabidiol, which is another constituent part of the cannabis plant that is more beneficial for pain relief and for spasms. So that would be my short answer on that, as short as I could get it. We'll go to another phone call here, and this is strange. My first three calls, Petoskey, Placentia, and Portland, and now we go to Mickey in Phoenix. It's all cities that start with a P here on the Bill Press Show. Mickey, welcome to the show.
Good morning. I appreciate the topic. I would point out that you do have a real strong political advocate for legalizing not just marijuana but all drugs, and Dr. Ron Paul. I've been a fan of his for years, and he's always said, what am I going to stop you? I mean, the DEA has never stopped a single person ever from getting high on whatever they want to get high on.
Yeah.
So I've always admired his position on that. They can't stop you from overeating, and they can't stop you from using drugs because there's a market. There's going to be a product. And myself, I'll tell you, I'm a 20-year recovering drug addict and alcoholic. For me, it was chronic use of marijuana. And I really do think that it is important to note the difference between a recreational or medicinal user and somebody who turns chronic. Myself, I smoked it every morning, every day for about 5 years, and it really had a significant impact on my life in a negative way.
And that can be true for some people. We recognize that, and again, we don't lock up unless an alcoholic causes crimes that affect other people. We don't lock them up for what they do to themselves, and I don't think locking you up for your problem use of cannabis would have been helpful either.
Oh, absolutely not. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a whole lot of different positions on it. You either get, it always seems like it comes down to the person who's a militant, pro-cannabis person, or the person who's militantly against it. And in the middle, for me, it's like, you know what? It's completely your individual right to do with your body as you wish. I don't think government, law enforcement, or your neighbor has any right to tell you whatsoever what you can ingest. However, I would just kind of temper that with the idea that it is a drug. It does have a very strong psychological impact on a person. I think an age restriction would be good, and I think just general education, like, hey, if you see yourself starting to get into a real bad pattern here of escaping from reality and the emotional pain it takes to develop into a full-grown adult, because life is a struggle. I mean, your strongest marijuana plants are the ones that struggle the most and grow firmer stalks. So I believe in struggle, not just running from problems using drugs. Yeah. And just to keep that education level there, and I think everything will be fine. I really do believe there is a difference between those who will become addicted and those who won't, and it's kind of funny how we don't understand each other, actually.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Mickey, thank you for your perspective on that. I appreciate your call. And yes, it's important that we understand that that people can use cannabis, they can use all sorts of drugs responsibly. It is possible, and that we need to gauge how we regulate these drugs based on their relative risk to not only the user but to society as well. The National Institutes of Drug Abuse will tell you that marijuana, amongst all the commonly popular illicit substances, and the legal substances for that matter, has some of the lowest risks of addiction and dependence of any drug. About 9% of the people that try marijuana will end up with, like Mickey, having a problem with it, using it to excess, using it irresponsibly perhaps, about 9%. We compare that to alcohol, the rate's about 15%. We compare that to cocaine, the rate's about 23%. We compare that to tobacco, the rates are about 35%. And yet there's varying degrees of illegality to all of those substances that have nothing to do with their possible harm to the user or to society. There's also another feature of drugs that's called a therapeutic ratio. Let me explain what this is. What it is the ratio of the effective dose to the lethal dose. And this is a scientific measurement. Effective dose means that in half the people we give this much drug, it works for them. It has the effect they're seeking, whether it gets them high, whether it heals them, whatever we're talking about. The lethal dose is in half the people we give this much to, it kills them. And the ratio between the two is known as the therapeutic ratio, which is an indication of the ratio of how much it takes to work versus how much it takes to kill you. Now, alcohol, the legal drug, has a 1 to 10 ratio, which means if one shot gets you drunk, 10 shots will kill you, in about half the population, a 1 to 10 ratio. Heroin, by comparison, is a 1 to 5 ratio. One hit of heroin gets you high, 5 hits could be the overdose that kills you. And it's the heroin's the drug with the strictest therapeutic ratio. Compare that to some of the other illegal drugs out there. Cocaine's ratio is about 1 to 15. Nitrous oxide's about 1 to 150. LSD and mushrooms are about 1 to 1,000. And cannabis is 1 to 20,000. That's right. If one hit of marijuana gets you high, it will take 20 to 40,000 hits of marijuana to kill you. Nobody has ever died from a recorded overdose from marijuana because it's not possible. THC is non-toxic to healthy cells and organs. In fact, the joke in our neck of the woods out here is that the only way you can die from marijuana is 1, if a 300-pound bale of it falls on you from 20 feet in the air, or 2, you're shot by a dealer or a cop over it. Those are the only ways marijuana should kill you. Our laws should start to reflect that. We'll take more of your calls after this break at 866-55-PRESS, 866-55-77-377. We're talking about the war on drugs, the legalization of marijuana. I'm Radical Russ Belville, filling in for Bill Press. We're right back after this. Welcome back, everyone. 47 after the hour. We're taking your calls here at 866-55-PRESS. I'm Radical Russ Belville, filling in for Bill Press. We're talking about the legalization of marijuana, or what we would hope would be the legalization of marijuana. Let's go to San Francisco, California. Teresa is waiting on the line. Teresa, welcome to the show.
Your last caller really said quite a bit, and I really liked the piece you said after he was on, because if we put our money into education, we wouldn't have all the problems we have with recreational use. I, for one, cannot use this drug recreationally, although I would consider this drug for my one son who is severely autistic. You've really got me thinking about that, because I hadn't considered it for him. He is on the violent side, but it's only because he thinks so very, very slowly. And it's hard for a person to say, please give me the toy, and then wait for 3 minutes for this command to get through to his poor little brain because he thinks so slowly. Now, he has violent outbursts because he thinks so slowly. And I think, yeah, it would slow him down. But that's kind of the problem with the drug for me and for a lot of people, is that it makes you not care about so much that's going on around you that is wrong. When you're normal and healthy, sometimes this recreational use can make you not care when your president takes you into an illegal war, or not care that people are being locked up all around you and wasting your tax money.
I got to interrupt you on that, Teresa, because I think the people that I know that are the regular cannabis users care much more about these things than just your general audience out there. I mean, I use cannabis every day, and these are things I think about and care about very deeply. So I think that's kind of a broad generalization.
But that's you, Russ. That's not me. I know that when I take one hit from a joint, now I haven't smoked in 25 years because of it. It's just one hit, and I'm on the couch sitting there going, I'm stupid for the next 6 to 8 hours.
No, and again, I don't see that there's anything wrong with that, though, compared to maybe you have a glass of wine or two and you get stupid for 6 to 8 hours.
There is something wrong with that, because when I have one beer, I'm fine in 2 hours. But the problem is the next day I don't care about politics and such. And I had to give those things up when I had children. I have 3 kids, and one does have severe autism, and takes a tremendous amount of my time. It's not the drug of choice for everyone. And
I agree with that. I don't think it's for everyone. And Teresa, thank you for your call. I appreciate you calling in. I do encourage you to check out UF4A.org, the Unconventional Foundation for Autism, and learn more about medical use of marijuana to help childhood autism. I know the women that I've interviewed on my show about this situation, one of them talked about her son having violent outbursts where they'd have 300 or more violent episodes a day, which is defined as hitting or biting or kicking either himself or someone else. And then after the use of a small bit of medical marijuana in a cookie, this child's violent outbursts went down by a factor of 100 per day, like maybe 3 outbursts at most per day. So there is true medicine behind this. All right, let's go to Chicago, Illinois. We've got Don waiting on the phone in Chicago. Don, welcome to the Bill Press Show.
Good morning. I cannot find myself getting out of the oppositional category when it comes to legalizing marijuana, because a lot of the callers that you have that are pro-marijuana, they also then, they segue right into, and you can't tell me what I can do with my body. And if I want to take drugs, to say it's not a gateway drug, and to say it's not a drug culture is really, I mean...
Well, how much of that is built on it being illegal, though? Really, I mean, nobody ever calls alcohol the gateway drug, and yet every heroin addict you'll ever talk to will tell you that they did alcohol before they did pot.
I'm completely oppositional to alcohol. I don't drink.
Okay. Well, at least you're consistent that way.
And alcohol is very regulated. I'm not saying that I'm not okay with regulation, but the word legalizing to a youth culture, that sounds like licentiousness. That's basically opening the floodgates to everything. I
like your point on that, Don, because that's something that I've been telling, because I basically in my job with NORML, I end up doing a lot of preaching to the choir, and I have to remind them that most of the people out there don't feel the same way they do, and that we throw out a word like legalization, and we saw this with Prop 19 in California. We asked people by Gallup poll, do you support legalizing marijuana? 58% of the people in California said yes, but as soon as we put words behind legalization, but as soon as there was an actual statute that defined what legalization was, it lost 12% of its support at the polls. So you're right. There does have to be better definition of what legalization means, and we have to emphasize that means regulation. That means responsibility. That means, being careful about it and setting up age requirements and being very strict about it. Thank you for your call, Don. You're not in that much opposition to me as you think you are. We both think the same way about that. We're going to take more calls in our last segment coming up here. We got to take a little bit of break and pay some more bills. It's the Bill Press Show. I'm Radical Russ. We'll see you in a minute. Welcome back back, folks. Radical Russ Belville here in the last segment, filling in for Bill Press. Tomorrow you'll get Rich Masters filling in, and next week Bill will be back for the first week of 2011. If you've liked the topic and you want to get more information on this, get in depth on it, join me on my show, Normal Show Live, which is live on the internet every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific at live.normal.org. We got live calls. We've got live chat. 2 hours of talk on this issue every day. All the latest breaking stories, all the political news, treated seriously by serious people. We're the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. It's the lightning round. We got time for a couple more calls here before we call it a day. Let's go to West Seattle, Washington. Stuart has been waiting patiently. Stuart, welcome to the show.
Yes, I think we need to have an anti-hypocrisy bill. We would remove the statute of limitations for legislators that subsequently vote for the continued criminalization of marijuana. If a legislator then votes for the continued criminalization of pot and it is shown that they once used pot, they must serve the sentence that they would have served if they had been caught and convicted of it. Or we could have the three presidents rule. If it's shown that three presidents have used pot after it was illegal, then we have to make it legal.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Stuart, for that note there. If there was an anti-hypocrisy bill, though, we'd have to go all the way back to the Constitution and the Three-Fifths Compromise, but written by men who said all men were created equal. Anyway, let's get one more call here. Anthony in Long Island, New York. Be quick, Anthony, about 30 seconds.
Good morning. I'm a social worker. I've worked in the field of addictions, and the problem with marijuana is that the reaction that most people have to it is based on emotion, not based on facts. So they need to educate themselves. They should probably listen to your show and do some reading on that. The other thing, the gateway theory is not at all based on science. In fact, there's a lot to be shown that people who use marijuana are less likely to use harder drugs. And I know clients who used cocaine, and when they would smoke marijuana, they did not use cocaine. So
that's right. It's the way of getting off the drugs. We appreciate that call. Thank you so much.
Where'd you learn that, Cheech? Drug school.
No, you learned it from Normal Show Live. Catch me Normal Show Live today, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Time at live.normal.org. I'm Radical Russ Belville. Thanks for having me here between your ears for the Bill Press Show this last couple of days. I really appreciate the opportunity to go in depth on this topic. Appreciate all of you listening to us. And tune in tomorrow. Rich Masters will be with you. I'm Radical Russ Belville saying good day from Portland, Oregon. We'll see you later.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Oh, boy, I messed up the play there, but it doesn't matter. Thanks, everybody, for checking out Normal Show Live today and enjoying the 2 days I played on Bill Press. That was always great to be there. Maybe next year we'll be there again. We'll take the Bill Press Show to pot in 2011. It'll be a lot of fun. Thanks for listening to Normal Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation. We're back tomorrow with our regular show, Wednesday, with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Get your live questions in on cannabis science, health, culture, history, and more. Big thanks goes out to Cannabob for recording today's Bill Press Show and taking out all the commercials. Thank you. Thank you so much, Cannabob. We can't do it without some of the great listeners that we have here at Normal Show Live. We appreciate all your hard work and all your support. We'll rerun this show. It's going to be about 2 hours and 15 minutes long. It's going to take me quite a bit of time to get this uploaded and compressed and all that. So be patient. We will have the replays just as soon as possible. Until then, we'll shuffle up some of our daily toker tunes for you to enjoy in the chat room. And I will have that replay uploaded to stash.normal.org, to iTunes, and in our replay rotation just as soon as I can get it all put together. Once again, thanks everybody. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.